Hey, have you ever had a first meeting that goes awesome? All boxes checked, prospect wants to take the next steps, and then crickets. You don't get what you need. You've been absolutely ghosted. What do you do from here? Stay tuned. I want to get into that, plus also meeting structures and how to do daily activities most effectively if you're a new producer. If you haven't joined us before, welcome back. My name is Micah Salas. This is the Max Revenue Show. This is our special series that we're calling Diary of a New Producer. And all that means is I'm giving you an inside look behind the curtain into me and new producers' meetings we have every Monday. His name's Incognito. He's trying to build a book of business from $0 to a million or more. So let's get into this. All right. So Ian has a little problem right now. He had a really nice prospect. The meeting went great. The person said that they had some pain points. They felt they maybe have outgrown their broker, thought due diligence makes sense. But after the meeting, he got one email with some information that he needed, but it was not even close to what he really needed to do proper due diligence and to really do a good assessment. And ever since that email exchange, about a week after the first meeting, it's been crickets. Now the renewal, this was back in October. Now the renewal is coming up February 1st. And Ian and I were talking about what should he do. And I said, man, at this point, it's January 15th today. There's not much you can do. What I would do is send an email, bow out, and just basically tell them like, hey, I was really looking forward to this, but we don't have all the information. I'm assuming you got too busy. I'll follow up 2 months after the renewal to see if timing works better at that point. If I could be a resource for you during the renewal process, let me know. That's it. There's nothing more you can do at this point. Now, looking back at the situation, I think there's a couple takeaways that you could learn if you're watching this. And Ian and I talked about, but you know, so the first takeaway from this story is that when you're having your first meeting and it's going really well, when it gets to that point where the client's like, hey, what do you need to do the due diligence? Make sure you go into more detail, specifically exactly what you need. The difference between a deck page and an actual full policy. So that conversation might go something like this. Yeah, what I need to do the due diligence is a full electronic copy of your policy. You should be sent this every year after renewal, 60 days after the renewal from your agent. So go check in your inbox if you can't find it. If you can't find it there, just send an email to your agent saying, hey, I need full copies of our policies, and they should be able to get those to you within a day or two. By doing this statement, a couple things is, you can address what you actually need, but you can also kind of create a little bit of a wedge if they don't have their policies or if their agent's kind of dragging their feet, right? So that's really helpful, I think. But also, a lot of clients think that deck pages or COIs are policies. They're just not, right? So, deck pages are a little bit helpful, but won't do the trick. So really talk through the client again, like, hey, you might have deck pages, that's just a few pages. A policy is a very large file, it's hundreds of pages sometimes, and it's just much thicker. So just talk through that with the client and also just reiterate the timelines of when you need this stuff by in order to execute and deliver. So the other thing that we talked about with this scenario where this prospect is kind of now fizzled out a little bit is the follow-up and the cadencing of it, right? So just don't assume because people ghost you that they're a bad person. A lot of times prospects just get busy, right? They have a lot of other important priorities, and you just need to assume that you're just not one of them at this point. That's totally fine. But now you've created a warm opportunity for the next year, right? Now, if they keep ghosting you year after year, that maybe is a signal. But so when I told them, I said, hey, send this last email. And then after the renewal, 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, send a follow-up email or and call and basically see if you can catch the guy, ask how the renewal went, and then just say, hey, I know we looked forward to this due diligence. I'd really like to do it. We don't have to do it 3, 4 months prior to your renewal. Sometimes I find it's better to do it middle of the year. Would you be opposed or would you see any reason that we can't do that now? Or is there a time maybe in the next couple months that make more sense? And so this is the approach that I would take in this scenario. Now, let's just say you call for the follow-up and you don't get them. What does my cadencing look like? What does my frequency look like? You don't want to be calling a guy every single week the whole year. I think that's just pointless. It's overkill. So you've already talked to him. You've met with him. He's kind of gotten too busy. So I would do that initial follow-up 8 weeks after the renewal. And then from there on out, probably once every 4 weeks, just try catching him on the phone until you get to that 4 or 5 month window cycle prior to the renewal. Then you just do your normal everyday frequencing where it's like, calling them twice a week or email them and really staying on them for that 1 to 2 month stretch. and seeing what could happen. I've had so many opportunities in this game that I win, not on year one, but year two or three, and you just got to keep planting those seeds. And some of them are going to sprout, some won't, but that's really the key to long-term success. All right. So second thing that Ian and I talked about was just a couple of like either this or that. Okay. So drops versus calls. And we also talked about in-person meetings versus phone meetings. If you've been following me for any time, you know that I love a big fan of just calling versus dropping in. Now, that being said, I have nothing against doing drop-ins. It's just I found phone calls have been more efficient use of my time. And so that's the route I've gone, especially in certain metro areas and with certain types of businesses as they go upstream. It's worked really well. But that doesn't mean drop-ins don't work. And so what Ian and I talked about is, maybe mixing in doing some drops once a week, just to one for your sanity, but two, just give you a different perspective, different outlook on things. And who knows, maybe for him that will be the catalyst to um, achieving better results than just the phone, right? So I'm not just saying that phone's the only way to do it. I just have seen it in my own walk and other people's that it's worked really well. But the thing I like with drop-ins, especially, is if you have prospects you've been calling and they're not, you haven't been able to catch them, but you really want to get in there, those can be prime prospects to do drops in. Also, one thing I've noticed when you do the drop, leave, for me, I wrote a book, right? So I leave that with a note, but maybe you have just a one-page article, nothing too long, or maybe you take the latest market data, highlight it with a few notes, just something on one page that's going to be somewhat memorable, somewhat unique, with a handwritten note. And then the key on the follow-ups on the drops is following up. Because a lot of times when you call back, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember you. And that's when you'll have success with that. Okay, and then the other, like I said, we talked about in person versus phone, and I told him this. I said, hey, if you can go in person, that is preferred. That is the best way to go. And but I don't want to be driving 3 hours for a 10-minute intro meeting if it doesn't even make sense, right? So you got to kind of use your gut feeling, use your experience on what makes sense and what doesn't. I'd say if it's within an hour, or especially 40 minutes, 30 minutes, I always like to go in person if I can. Um, and obviously, most people are open to that. Now, I've had a lot of success not going in person, right? And just doing all these 15-minute, basically 10, 15-minute, 20-minute intro meetings over the phone. It can still work really well, but I think that in-person dynamic can just change things. A perfect example, I had a meeting with a, a prospect last week I hadn't seen for over 3 years. Went out there and I was debating. It was a 3 hour drive. So I was like, but the reason I drove is I felt like it could lead to a BOR, which it basically did. Um, what ended up happening is I went out there and we talked for what I thought would be 30 minutes, but it ended up being about 2 hours and got into the weeds on what all their issues were, what we could do. And this person and I had known each other in the past, so that helped. But anyways, yeah, walked away with basically BOR, 50,000 plus in revenue. They own two different companies. So really excited. And the key is that, you know, the key is do drops if you can. And all right. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is, um, sorry for that pause there, by the way. My phone got disconnected. But the last thing that we talked about this week was daily activity and just a way to break it down. And for Ian specifically, instead of thinking about 50 calls a day, that's his goal for this new year. He's like, it's a lot easier if I can do 25 in the morning, 25 in the afternoon. Great. That's awesome. So whatever you need to do to break down a goal to make it more digestible and achievable, do that, right? If it's hourly, great. If it's, like Ian did, that's fine. For me, I'm fine with just a day goal. But and along with that, I want to talk about so a thing that Ian's struggling with that I think most of us are struggling with. And if we're all being honest, we like our vacations, but when you try to come back, that phone feels like 1,000 pounds. It's very difficult. And so he's like, man, this long layoff is just kind of messing with me psychologically, hard to get back in the swing of things. And I would just say this, especially if you're a young producer, I don't like to be off more than probably a week at a time. And not saying you got to be a grinder, right? Like 80 hours a week, working like a dog. But um, when I take extended time off, I get out of the swing of things, especially as a new producer, you're trying to keep that momentum going. So, even if you take a vacation and it's like you got some downtime, I don't want this to come across the way of like I'm just be a workhorse, but check your email a little bit here and there. It's not going to kill you an hour in the morning, hour in the afternoon, or maybe get away for an hour to make some calls and just to try to stay in the swing of things. Because what happens around Christmas, especially, is those weeks can stack up with New Year's, Christmas, vacation, kids off of school. After 4 weeks, you kind of lose that momentum. And if you're a new producer, you can really start to feel that pressure and the weight of like, oh man, I got to really get my pipeline back and all this stuff. So that's all I would say is like just try to stay consistent, right? Especially when you're a new young producer, it's really really helpful. So hey, that's all I got for you this week. I think this was week 2022. Basically, Ian's about halfway through the year. I know he's disappointed in his own revenue number at this point. Which is, like I said, just under 15,000. But hey, he's 5 months in. I, your first 6 months are really, really tough. Not saying that you can't be very successful in that time, but he's got a good pipeline. He's got some stuff he's working on, and I just think a matter of kind of sharpening some of the the processes after those first meetings, right? Getting those people moving forward. That's such a key part of it. So that's what we're going to be working on this year, and I'm feeling good about it. So, anyways, if you've enjoyed the show, do us a huge favor. Give us a thumbs up, leave some comments below, and go get them.